Hi guys, this is Travis Leglatter, Extension Weed Scientist at the University of Kentucky. And today what we want to talk about is boom height and its influence on herbicide drift. So what we're going to do today is we're going to demonstrate how that boom height and how its height or level above your soybean canopy or your weed canopy is going to influence the amount that it drifts. So we talk a lot about drift and wind speed, nozzle selection, droplet size, but the one thing we don't talk about a lot or focus on a whole lot is boom height. So having your boom at the correct height goes a long ways towards not only making sure you get the right amount of coverage, but the amount of drift that you have. So the higher that boom is in the air, the more potential drift you have. So today what we're going to do is we're going to demonstrate that effect using booms at 3 different heights, and we're out here in a soybean field, and today the wind is blowing, and it's going to be blowing anywhere from 5 to 8 miles an hour with some max wind gusts of about 10 miles an hour. So now let's go look at those boom heights. All right, so this is our first boom height, and what it's going to be is it's going to be 18 to 24 inches. It's actually 24 inches. And because we're really looking at drift onto these soybeans, it's 24 inches above the height of the soybean. So 18 to 24 inches should be the ideal height for our boom when we're making herbicide applications. That height does 2 things for us. The first thing is these nozzles are designed to overlap. So it's a tapered nozzle. So what's on the outside of this fan is actually less than what's in the middle. So when we spray this, that taper will actually overlap, and you'll get overlap right here. And with that overlap, that means you get even, consistent coverage across this entire boom. If you were to raise or lower this boom, you lose that even coverage. So if you raise it up, you get more overlap and you're actually getting uneven coverage. But the bigger thing is, at this height, what we're getting is your droplets get very quickly from the tip down to the soybean, and when it gets there more quickly, we have less chance of drift as compared to the other heights that we're going to be looking at next. All right, so for this boom height, we are 48 inches off the target, which is again the soybean. So you can see this boom height is much higher. So 48 inches or 4 foot above that boom height. So remember, the last one was half of this, and that was the ideal boom height. Now, bringing up your boom this high, while it is much more comfortable if you're using a 120 and 90 foot boom, it makes it much more comfortable, especially in these Kentucky fields that are not flat and they are not square. But with this, again, if you remember that overlap, you're going to get a whole lot more overlap, and you're probably going to get at least 100% overlap. So you're not going to get even coverage because these are not designed to be overlapped 100%. And the other thing is you've increased your distance of travel by twice. So you have twice the amount of time that droplet spins in the air. And on a day like today, where it's not super windy, but we still have gusts of 8 to 10 miles an hour, those droplets that take longer to get from here to their target have more likelihood of moving off target. So let's go look at the last, or the worst case scenario. Okay, and then the final height, this is 72 inches, so 6 foot off of that soybean canopy. So I'm 6'1", so you can see it's above my head, but it's off the soybean canopy. And this is really the worst case scenario. And again, while this is much more comfortable for an applicator with that big boom, having to avoid obstacles and different elevations in the terrain, this is also the worst case scenario for drift. Again, because you're having to take such a long time, it takes a long time for that droplet to find its target. And in that amount of time, even on a nice calm day like this, where it's 5 to 8 mile an hour winds, good wind conditions for spraying, but this is going to move a lot further off target than when we have it at 2 foot or that 24 inches, which is more ideal. And the other thing, again, your overlap is way off on this. You're going to get a ton of overlap with this height above your target. So that's why we don't want to be at this height. So what we'll do now is we'll actually take a look at all 3 of these spraying simultaneously in this wind to look at that drift pattern. All right, so what we're going to show you now is we're going to spray these simultaneously for 10 seconds. And you can see our 3 heights there. And what we're going to do is hopefully you'll be able to see it drifting further from that highest boom than the lowest boom. 3, 2, 1, go. So you can see there on the furthest boom how much further it's drifting than the one that's closest here that doesn't have as much drift. Stop. Okay, so We watched them spray, and you could see with that highest boom, just with the pink dye, you could see how much further it was drifting down. But even visually now, after they've sprayed, this is where the boom was, what, 24 inches, and you can see the pink dye has come out maybe 2 foot from where it was sprayed on that flag. So we'll move on back and look at the next ones now. Okay, now we're on the boom that was at 48 inches or 4 foot above the canopy here. And you can see I'm standing kind of at the edge where we can see that pink dye, and I'm about twice the length or maybe 3 times the distance as it was on that first one. So just by the dye alone, you can see how much further this drifted. And we'll come back in a week because we do have a contact herbicide in here, and we'll come back in a week and we'll actually look at the herbicide injury downwind, because I suspect that we have even further injury downwind in this. So let's go look at the last one, or the highest height. Okay, now we're on the last flag, or the last boom, which was 72 inches or 6 foot above the soybean canopy. And now I'm at least 15 feet, if not 20 feet away from where that is. And that's putting me where I can last find this dye. Now, this is where the dye drifted to. We suspect that the actual product drifted further than this. And again, that's where we'll come back and look at that in about a week to see where that contact product moved. But again, just simply from using this dye, you can see how much more drift we got just by simply having a boom higher in the air. So again, the one thing that we kept even on all of these is we had the same nozzle and the same pressure on all of these. So the only thing different was that boom height. And just this here alone, you can see how much further it drifted just by increasing that boom height up to 72 inches from that 24 inches. All right, guys. We are back out here. It is 1 week after we made the applications. So here we are. And what we're looking at here, if you look at the 3 orange flags and the 3 black bicycle flags, that is, we're trying to kind of shoot from the same area we shot the drift application from. And what you're looking at here again is different drift distances at different boom heights. So the first flag, the boom was at 24 inches, where we would like to have the boom, or where it needs to be. The second one is at 48 inches, double that height. And then the last one is at 72 inches, and that's all above the soybean canopy at the time of application. Now you can see the orange flags kind of veering off to the left there, and those are the flags where I went out and found the end of obvious drift. So we sprayed saflufenicil. We sprayed a really low rate. It was about a 1/1000th X rate of saflufenicil that we sprayed. We didn't want to put too much on. We didn't want it to cause ourselves some plant back issues, and we didn't really want to take out the soybean crop either. So just using a PPO inhibitor that would give us some markings out here, and it did a pretty good job of that. So where we ended here was at the obvious drift. So let's start out here looking at the 24 inch. So you can see there the obvious death of the soybeans right underneath the boom. And then if you kind of look at that drift pattern, it points us towards that direction. So that's kind of where I walked. And you can see here again the type of injury I was looking for, that bronzing that you get from PPO inhibitors, and then that speckling as well. That's what I was looking for. And out to about this point, I stopped whenever the obvious injury ended. So from this point forward, if I would have kept walking, I'm sure I would have found some more speckling out there if I looked really hard. But this was the point where it was the obvious speckling really stopped. That's probably about the last leaf there. And we were looking at about 10 foot from this orange flag back to that bicycle flag where that was sprayed. So 10 foot of obvious PPO inhibitor injury from that flag when we had our boom at 24 inches, or the correct height. So that's pretty good in a 7 mile an hour wind using an XR nozzle, 40 psi. So 10 foot of drift. Then we'll just kind of look back down the line here, and you can see there's our 24, and you can see our 48, excuse me, and then in the background you can see the 72. So let's check out this 48 inch height. Okay, so let's go stand right where the boom was at again. And you can see, as with all drift, it kind of points us in the direction. The wind kind of blew a little bit more towards the north than we expected, but you can see there the pattern pointing towards that orange flag. And again, just the obvious soybean death, or the overall really severe necrosis, goes further out, and that's simply by having that boom 48 inches in the air. or above our target, or double the height of what we want. And again, I was looking for that obvious speckling and the obvious burn, and just kind of followed that until the really obvious stuff ended. And again, you can see here, there's kind of the last leaf I saw that told me that was obvious injury, and that put us right at 25 foot. Again, I probably could have found more speckling downwind, but I just stopped at the obvious speckling for these, just for the ease or for the sake, and that's at 25 foot from that bicycle flag. So remember, this is 48-inch boom height. We had a drift distance of approximately 25 foot. Pan back there to our 24-inch boom height, and remember that was only 10 foot. So just by raising our boom to 48 inches, which doesn't seem like much, but by just doubling that boom height, we over doubled our drift distance using the same nozzle and the same pressure with the winds. Again, remember, these are sprayed at the exact same time, so the wind was all the same. And then finally, let's go look at the 72-inch boom height. This is a boom height that's way too high, 6 foot above the canopy, but the reality is we see this as we drive around Kentucky and we see applicators out there spraying. We know that's much more comfortable boom height, but that's a boom height that is always going to give us more drift. So overall, if you just kind of look at the very severe, very obvious injury, you can see that goes past 10 foot. That's more injury further out at 72 inches than we had at the 24 inches, just looking for even minute injury. So it's pretty obvious how far that drift is. Now the soybeans aren't dead. We distributed that small amount of staflofenicil across the larger area, so overall the injury is not as bad. But if we go kind of to that point and keep walking out and keep looking at that severe injury, again, you know, it starts with just lots of necrosis on those leaves, and as we walk out, you can still see that necrosis on those leaves, getting that speckling that we expect from a PPO inhibitor. And we keep walking, we're still finding it. You're still seeing some there. Pretty classic PPO inhibitor injury. There's some there. Keep walking until we just can't see the obvious stuff anymore. There's another one. And as we go out, it gets thinner and thinner, but that's kind of the end of the obvious. And that puts us at that flag right there, which is 41 foot. So let's pan back there. A lot further away from that bicycle flag there on this one. 41 foot there. Sorry, I was on the wrong flag. Here's where we're looking at there. That's 41 foot. Compare that back to that 48-inch boom height. That was about 25 foot. And then you go back to the last one there at 24 inches, and you're looking about 10 foot. And again, we're just stopping at the obvious injury, so to where when we're walking, it's the last point where we see that really obvious speckling there. So again, just by simply lowering our boom height down to 24 inches, we reduce our drift significantly by lowering that boom height. And that's what we're really trying to drive home, keeping those booms at 24 inches. That is the key to reducing drift. Not only is it droplet size and nozzle design, nozzle selection, but also boom height. It is a huge factor we can use to help ourselves in reducing drift. Until next time, thanks for tuning in.